blind girl was sold to a stranger by her mother. Unexpectedly, he turned out to be a CEO, and he took her virginity. Hi, my very, very beautiful family. Welcome home to Mr. Peter Stories. Every time I speak to you, I feel like I'm speaking to my heart. You are not just my audience. You are the family I never knew I needed. Your presence is my blessing. Your love is my fuel. Do you feel my love? Because I feel yours. Deeply. Let me hold your hands through these words and lift you up with a prayer made with pure love. Dear God, thank you for this beautiful family you've given me across the world. I may not know every face, but you know their hearts. I ask you to bless them with a peace that calms every storm, with love that heals every wound, and with joy that no one can take away. Protect them from silent battles and dry their secret tears. Give them strength to rise each day and courage to keep dreaming. Remind them they are loved by you and by me. Let this be their season of answered prayers and quiet miracles. In your holy name, amen. Now, my precious family, if I've made you smile, cry, think, or feel something beautiful in your heart, then I know I'm doing my job. So tell me, am I delivering good content? Rate me out of 10, honestly and with love. Your voice matters to me more than views or numbers ever will. And if you are present, heart, mind, and soul, comment, yes, I'm here with you, Mr. Peter, so I know we're connected. Don't forget to like and comment if you feel my heart in every word I speak, because my stories are more than stories. They are pieces of my soul shared with you. Let's begin today, not just with storytelling, but with something deeper. Let's start with love. Pure, honest, healing love. Forever yours, Mr. Peter. The cramped apartment reeked of desperation and cheap liquor. Jade Walker sat at the window, her unseeing eyes turned toward the warmth of sunlight she could feel but not see. Her fingers traced the peeling paint on the windowsill, counting the chips and cracks, a habit she'd developed in the 11 years since losing her sight. The sounds of the struggling neighborhood filtered through the thin glass. Children shouting, music blaring from passing cars, the constant hum of a city that never quite embraced those who lived in this forgotten corner. At 23, Jade had learned to navigate both her blindness and her mother's unpredictable moods with the same careful precision. Her long, elegant fingers, a pianist's fingers, her grandmother used to say, moved with practiced ease as she braided her dark hair, feeling each strand twist into place. Despite the poverty that had defined her existence, there was an undeniable grace to Jade. Her velvet brown skin glowed even in the dim light of their apartment, and when she moved, it was with a dancer's elegance, memorizing spaces until she could flow through them unhindered. Jade? Her mother's voice carried from the kitchen, the slight slur telling Jade exactly what kind of day it was going to be. Come in here, baby. We need to talk. Teresa Walker had once been beautiful, sharing the same high cheekbones and full lips as her daughter. But years of hard living had carved lines into her face that even Jade could feel when she touched her mother's cheeks. There had been a time when Teresa would sing Jade to sleep, her voice rich and warm. Now her voice mostly carried the rasp of too many cigarettes and too many broken promises. Jade made her way to the kitchen, one hand lightly trailing along the wall. "What is it, Mama?" she asked, already sensing the familiar tension in the air. "Sit down, baby." Teresa's chair scraped against the linoleum floor. "I've got some good news. We're going to be okay." Jade lowered herself into the chair opposite her mother, her hands finding and folding atop the sticky table surface. "What do you mean? Those men, the ones I owe money to, they won't be bothering us anymore." Teresa's words rushed out, too bright, too cheerful. "I found a way to pay them back. All of it, baby girl. We're free." A cold weight settled in Jade's stomach. Her mother had been gambling again, trying to win enough to cover her debts to people who didn't take kindly to being owed. The threats had become more frequent, more violent. Just last week, Jade had heard the muffled sounds of her mother begging through the thin apartment walls, promising payment soon. "How?" Jade asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How did you get that kind of money, Mama?" Teresa's fingers drummed nervously on the table. "You remember me telling you about that businessman, the one who heard you singing at the community center last month?" Jade nodded slowly. She remembered her mother's excitement afterward, talking about a man in an expensive suit who'd asked questions about her daughter. "Well, he contacted me again." Teresa's voice took on a desperate edge. "He has this big house outside the city. He needs companionship, and he was very taken with you, baby. Very impressed." The cold in Jade's stomach spread to her chest, making it hard to breathe. "What are you saying, Mama? He's going to take care of you, baby girl. Give you everything I never could." Teresa reached across the table, grasping Jade's hands tightly. "Nice clothes, good food, a real roof over your head that doesn't leak when it rains. And in return—" Her voice trailed off. "In return, what?" Jade pulled her hands away, her heart hammering against her ribs. "What did you do? I didn't have a choice." Teresa's voice cracked. "They were going to hurt us, Jade. They said they'd take it out on you if I didn't pay. This man, Roman, he's rich, educated. He promised you'd have your own rooms, everything you need." The truth crashed down on Jade like a physical blow. "You sold me," she whispered, the words burning her throat. "You sold your own daughter. I protected you." Teresa's chair scraped back. "You think I wanted this? You think I had any other option? Those men would have done worse, baby. Much worse." Jade stood, her legs trembling beneath her. "When?" The single word was all she could manage. "He's coming tonight." Teresa's voice had gone small. "Pack your things, just the essentials. He said he'd provide everything else." Jade felt her way back to her room, closing the door with careful control when all she wanted was to slam it, to scream, to break everything her hands could find. Instead, she sank onto her bed, fingers clutching the worn quilt her grandmother had made, the grandmother who would have never allowed this to happen. The hours passed in a fog of disbelief. Jade packed mechanically, filling a small bag with the few treasures that defined her life: her grandmother's brooch, a worn paperback of poetry in Braille, the small music box that still played despite its broken hinge. Her fingers lingered on each item, memorizing them anew, as if touching them now might anchor her in a world suddenly spinning out of control. When the knock came at the door, Jade was sitting on the edge of her bed, her bag packed, her face a careful mask of composure. She heard her mother's nervous chatter, followed by a man's voice, deep, smooth, with the confidence of someone who had never worried about making rent or choosing between electricity and food. "Ms. Walker," the voice said, and Jade felt something unexpected stir within her at its rich timbre. "I'm Roman Carter. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Jade didn't stand, didn't acknowledge him. She kept her unseeing eyes fixed straight ahead, her spine rigid. "The pleasure is all yours," she replied, her voice cold. A moment of silence followed, then a soft chuckle. "I understand your anger," he said, stepping into the room. Jade could smell expensive cologne, subtle but unmistakably fine. "But I assure you my intentions—" "Save it," Jade cut him off. "I'm not interested in your intentions. My mother made her choice. I don't appear to have one." Teresa's nervous voice cut in. "Jade, please. Mr. Carter has been very generous. He's going to take good care of you." "Like a pet," Jade said bitterly, "or a new possession." "That's not how I see this arrangement," Roman said, his voice closer now. Jade could sense him standing just a few feet away. "But we can discuss the details once we're at my home. Do you have everything you need?" Jade stood, slinging her small bag over her shoulder. "Bold of you to assume I had much to begin with." She felt his hand reach for her arm, then hesitate, and withdraw. "May I guide you to the car?" he asked, his tone softer than before. "I can find my way," Jade replied. "I've been doing it for years." She moved toward the door, her cane sweeping in practiced arcs before her. Her heart was shattering, but she wouldn't give either of them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Teresa caught her at the door, pulling her into a desperate embrace. "I love you, baby girl," she whispered against Jade's hair. "I did what I had to do. Someday you'll understand." Jade stood stiffly in her mother's arms, not returning the embrace. "Goodbye, Mama," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. The finality of those words hung in the air between them. Outside, the night air was cool against Jade's face as Roman led her to his car. The door he opened had a solid, expensive sound when it closed, the sound of a world Jade had never been part of. As the car pulled away from the curb, taking her from the only home she'd ever known, Jade finally allowed a single tear to slip down her cheek, turning her face toward the window so the man who had bought her wouldn't see this moment of weakness. "It's a 40-minute drive," Roman said after several minutes of silence. "You should try to rest." Jade said nothing, her fingers tracing the unfamiliar texture of the leather seat beneath her. She hadn't been able to protect herself from her mother's betrayal, but she would protect her heart from whatever this man had planned. No matter what happened next, she would not break. She would not become another possession in this stranger's collection. As the car carried her into the unknown, Jade made a silent promise to herself. This was not the end of her story. Somehow, someday, she would reclaim her freedom and her dignity, and no matter how gilded her cage might be, she would never forget that it was still a cage. Chapter 2. Gilded Chains. The car moved through the night with barely a sound, the expensive engine purring beneath them as city streets gave way to winding roads that climbed into the hills. Jade sat rigidly, one hand clutching the door handle, the other gripping her cane so tightly her knuckles ached. She refused to speak, refused to acknowledge the man beside her whose cologne drifted through the car's interior. Sandalwood and something else she couldn't name, something that spoke of wealth and power. "We're almost there," Roman said, breaking the thick silence that had stretched between them for most of the journey. "I thought you might like to know." Jade turned her face toward him, her unseeing eyes landing somewhere near his shoulder. "Is that supposed to comfort me?" Her voice was soft but edged with steel. Roman sighed, a sound of unexpected weariness. "I understand this situation is difficult, but I hope you'll reserve judgment until..." "Until what?" Jade cut him off. "Until I understand why a man buys a woman from her own mother? Please, enlighten me." The car slowed, turning onto what felt like a private drive. Jade could sense the change in the road, the slight rise as they climbed. Then the car came to a stop and the engine fell silent. "We're here," Roman said simply. "My home." Moments later, Jade felt the night air on her face as Roman opened her door. She stepped out cautiously, her cane finding solid stone beneath her feet. The air smelled different here, cleaner, with the scent of flowers and freshly cut grass. No blaring music, no shouting voices, no sour smell of garbage waiting too long for collection. The silence was almost unnerving after a lifetime in the city. "May I?" Roman's voice was closer now, his hand lightly touching her elbow. Jade stiffened, but gave a short nod. Much as she hated to admit it, she needed guidance in this unfamiliar place. His touch was light, respectful, as he led her forward. Jade counted, steps automatically, creating a mental map as they walked. 5 steps up to the front entrance," Roman said, slowing his pace. "There's a handrail to your right." Inside, the air was cool and smelled of lemon polish and something floral. The floor beneath Jade's feet changed from stone to what felt like marble, then to thick carpet as Roman guided her through what must have been an entrance hall into another room. "This is the main living room," he explained. Your suite is on this floor, toward the east wing of the house. I thought you might prefer not to navigate stairs. Jade's grip on her cane tightened. How considerate of you to think of my comfort. While purchasing me, Roman's intake of breath was sharp. I didn't purchase you, Ms. Walker. Really? Jade's laugh was bitter. My mother's debts are cleared, and suddenly I'm here. What would you call it? A complicated situation. Roman released her elbow. One that I'd like to explain, if you'd listen. Jade crossed her arms over her chest. I'm not going anywhere, am I? Speak. She heard him move, fabric shifting against furniture as he sat down. Please, sit, he offered. When Jade remained standing, he sighed again. As you wish. The truth is, your mother approached me after I heard you sing at that community center event. She noticed my interest in your talent and saw an opportunity to sell her daughter, Jade finished flatly. To escape the men who were threatening both of you, Roman corrected. She came to my office the next day asking for money. When I refused, she became desperate. She told me about the loan sharks, about the threats they'd made, not just against her, but against you specifically. Jade's composure faltered slightly. She hadn't known the threats had targeted her directly. I still refused, Roman continued. I don't make a habit of paying off strangers' gambling debts, but then 2 weeks later, she called my office in hysterics. Said these men had given her a deadline, had threatened to take it out on her pretty blind daughter if she didn't pay. His voice hardened. That's when I made the arrangement. What arrangement exactly? Jade asked, her voice quieter now. That I would clear her debts. In exchange, you would come live here, where you'd be safe from these men. They're not the type to simply go away once paid. They know where you live. They know your routines. A chill ran through Jade as the implications of his words sank in. Still, the situation remained the same. She had been traded like property, regardless of the justification. And what do you expect from me in return for this protection? She asked, forcing the words past the tightness in her throat. Roman stood, his movement making the floorboards creak slightly. Nothing you're unwilling to give, he said, his voice suddenly closer. You'll have your own suite of rooms, private bath, a small kitchen if you prefer to make your own meals rather than eat with me. Your door locks from the inside. You're not a prisoner here, Jade. The use of her first name shouldn't have affected her, but something in the way he said it, soft, respectful, sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. And if I wanted to leave, she challenged, the city is 30 miles from here. There's no public transportation. I would drive you wherever you wanted to go, but I cannot in good conscience leave you vulnerable to the men your mother crossed. His voice had taken on a note of genuine concern that confused Jade even more. I'm asking for 1 month. Stay here, where it's safe, until I can ensure those men understand that harming you would be unwise. And after a month? If you wish to leave, then I'll help you find a place of your own. Set you up with enough to start over. Jade's hand trembled slightly on her cane. It was more consideration than she'd expected, but still left her feeling powerless. Why, she asked finally, why go to all this trouble for a stranger? There was a long pause, and when Roman spoke again, his voice held a quality she couldn't quite decipher. I heard you sing one song, and I couldn't forget your voice. It reminded me of someone I lost, someone special. He cleared his throat. And I despise men who prey on women. Your mother may have made poor choices, but you shouldn't pay for them. Jade didn't know how to respond to that. The ground beneath her feet felt less certain now, her righteous anger complicated by his unexpected explanation. Before she could reply, Roman spoke again. You must be exhausted. Let me show you to your rooms. He led her through the house, describing the layout as they walked. Kitchen to the left, dining room beyond that. Library to the right. All my books have audio versions as well if you enjoy reading. My office is down that hallway. Here we are. This is your suite. A door opened, and Roman guided Jade inside. The air changed, taking on a fresh, clean scent, with a hint of lavender. Bedroom straight ahead, bathroom to the right, sitting room to the left with a small kitchenette. Jade stepped forward cautiously, her cane sweeping the unfamiliar space. The floors were smooth hardwood with plush area rugs. Her hand touched a piece of furniture, a sofa covered in what felt like velvet. Everything in here has been arranged. For ease of navigation, Roman explained. No sharp corners on the furniture, nothing in the walking paths. The bathroom has safety rails installed. Jade ran her fingers along the sofa's back, speechless for a moment. He had prepared for her, arrival with far more consideration than she'd expected. It unnerved her. I've had some clothes brought in, Roman continued. They're in the closet in the bedroom. If they don't fit or aren't to your liking, we can get others. I brought my own clothes, Jade said, gesturing to her small bag. Of course. Those too. There was an awkward silence. Jade sensed him watching her, felt the weight of his gaze like a physical touch on her skin. I've kept you up too late, he said finally. You must be tired. There's food in the refrigerator if you're hungry. Breakfast is at 8, but you're welcome to eat in your rooms if you prefer. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, there's a phone beside the bed. My number is programmed in. If you need anything, day or night, call. The door closed softly behind him, leaving Jade alone in her gilded cage. She stood motionless for several minutes, trying to process everything that had happened. Then, slowly, methodically, she began to explore her new surroundings, building a mental map of the space. The bedroom was larger than her entire apartment had been, with a bed so soft it felt like falling into a cloud. The bathroom gleamed with marble and chrome, the tub deep enough to soak in. In the closet, her fingers found silks and cashmeres and cotton so fine they felt like water running through her hands. Jade sank onto the edge of the bed, emotion finally overtaking her. Anger, fear, confusion, and beneath it all, a shameful flicker of relief. Relief to be away from the tension and uncertainty that had defined her life with her mother. Relief to be in a place where the roof didn't leak and the heat worked and there was food in the refrigerator. She hated herself for feeling it. Hated Roman for creating this impossible situation where she was simultaneously captive and more free than she'd been in years. Most of all, she hated that his voice, deep and resonant, had stirred something in her she couldn't name and didn't want to acknowledge. Jade curled up on the bed, still fully dressed, and let the tears come at last. She cried for the mother who had betrayed her, for the life she had lost, for the uncertainty of her future. She cried until exhaustion finally claimed her, pulling her down into dreamless sleep. In the morning, she would begin building her defenses, finding a way to survive this strange new reality without losing herself in the process. But for now, in the darkness that was her constant companion, Jade surrendered to the small mercy of unconsciousness, her tears drying on cheeks still flushed with the heat of her anger and confusion. Chapter 3. First Sparks. 3 days passed in a strange, suspended state. Jade spent most of her time in her suite, emerging only when she was certain Roman was away from the house. Mrs. Bennet, the housekeeper, a kind-voiced older woman with a slight Irish accent, had shown Jade around the main areas of the house, helping her build a mental map of her surroundings. With each passing day, Jade grew more confident navigating the space, counting steps between locations, memorizing the texture of different floors and carpets, learning the scents of each room. The library became her sanctuary. Mrs. Bennet had shown her the extensive collection of audiobooks and the sophisticated player system that allowed Jade to easily find and listen to anything she wanted. There, surrounded by the smell of leather-bound books and polished wood, Jade could almost Forget the circumstances that had brought her to this place. It was on the fourth evening that the storm hit. Jade was curled in a leather armchair in the library, listening to a biography of Ella Fitzgerald, when the first rumble of thunder shook the windows. The narrator's voice continued, but Jade's attention drifted to the sounds of the storm building outside, the increasing patter of rain against glass, the wind beginning to moan through the trees that surrounded the estate. She had always loved storms, the way they filled the air with electricity and possibility. In her small apartment, she would often sit by the window during thunderstorms, feeling the vibrations of thunder through the glass, imagining the lightning that she could no longer see. Here, with floor-to-ceiling windows and no neighboring buildings to block the full force of nature, the storm felt closer, more immediate. Jade paused the audiobook and sat in appreciative silence, listening to the symphony of rain and wind. Then the lights went out, and the soft hum of electricity that was always present in the background fell silent. "Wonderful," she muttered to herself with a hint of irony. While darkness made no difference to her, the sudden power outage had disoriented her momentarily. She rose from the chair, reaching for her cane that leaned against the side table. As she moved toward where she believed the door to be, Jade miscalculated. Her hip connected painfully with the corner of a bookshelf she hadn't properly mapped in her mind. She stumbled, thrown off balance, and her cane clattered to the floor, sliding away on the polished wood. For a moment she stood frozen, suddenly unsure of her surroundings. The familiar landscape she had carefully memorized had shifted in her mind, leaving her adrift in a sea of darkness more complete than her blindness had ever been. Frustration welled up, hot and unwelcome, as she crouched and began sweeping her hands across the floor, searching for her cane. "Jade?" Roman's voice came from the doorway, startling her. "Are you all right? The generator should kick in any minute." "I'm fine," she said automatically, still searching for her cane with growing frustration. "I just dropped my cane." She heard his footsteps approaching, then a soft "ah" as he presumably spotted it. "It's about 3 feet to your right," he told her. Jade shifted, reaching out, and felt the familiar shape beneath her fingertips. Relief washed through her as she grasped it. "Thank you," she said stiffly, rising to her feet. "The backup generator should have kicked in by now," Roman said, concern evident in his voice. "I should check the circuit breakers. Would you like me to help you back to your room first?" A particularly violent crack of thunder made Jade jump slightly. "I can find my way," she assured him, though with less confidence than she would have liked. "It's no trouble," Roman insisted gently. "The power outage has probably disoriented you. Even I'm finding it difficult to navigate, and I can see—" Jade hesitated, pride warring with practicality. Another crash of thunder decided for her. "All right," she conceded. "May I?" Roman asked, his voice closer now. When Jade nodded, she felt his hand lightly touch the small of her back. Even through the fabric of her blouse, his touch sent an unexpected warmth spreading across her skin. She tensed, not from discomfort, but from the surprising intensity of her reaction. Roman guided her from the library into the hallway, his hand remaining a steady presence on her back. They moved slowly, Roman describing obstacles as they encountered. Them, his voice, deep and steady, created a path for her to follow as surely as his touch. "Steps coming up," he warned. 3 of them, then we'll turn right." Jade counted each step, her cane confirming what Roman's words promised. As they turned down another hallway, a flash of lightning illuminated the space, visible even to Jade's damaged eyes as a burst of white-hot light through the windows. The sudden flash startled her, and she stumbled slightly, turning toward Roman. His hands came up to steady her, one at her waist, the other catching her arm. For a moment they stood impossibly close, the heat of his body radiating against hers. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice lower, rougher than before. Jade was suddenly intensely aware of his proximity, of the gentle pressure of his hands, of the scent of his cologne mingling with something uniquely him. "Yes," she whispered, her voice betraying her. Another flash of lightning illuminated them, and Roman made a small sound in his throat. "You're crying," he said softly, his voice filled with concern. Jade hadn't even realized tears had formed in her eyes. She tried to turn away, embarrassed, but Roman's hand moved from her arm to her face, his thumb gently wiping away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. The touch was so unexpectedly tender that Jade froze. His thumb lingered on her cheekbone, warm and slightly calloused. Without thinking, she leaned into the touch, her body responding before her mind could protest. Roman's breath caught audibly. For one suspended moment, they stood together in the darkness, his hand cradling her face, her body instinctively leaning toward his warmth. The air between them seemed to crackle with the same electricity that filled the storm-charged sky outside. Then the lights flickered on as the generator finally engaged, breaking the spell. Roman's hand fell away from her face, and Jade stepped back, her heart pounding in her chest. "We should—" Roman cleared his throat. "Your room is just down this hallway, the third door on the right." Jade nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They continued in silence, the moment that had passed between them hanging in the air like the lingering scent of lightning. At her door, Roman paused. "Will you be all right now?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Yes," Jade managed, her composure returning. "Thank you for your assistance." "Jade," Roman said, as she turned to enter her room, "if you need anything, don't hesitate to call. The storm is supposed to get worse before it gets better." She nodded again, then slipped inside her room, closing the door firmly behind her. Leaning against it, Jade pressed her hands to her flushed cheeks, trying to calm her racing heart. What had just happened? How had a simple touch affected her so deeply? She had spent the past 4 days building walls around herself, determined to remain cold and distant with the man who had effectively purchased her from her mother. Yet in one unguarded moment, those walls had threatened to crumble. It was the situation, she told herself firmly. The disorientation of the power outage, the vulnerability of being without her bearings, the primal response to the storm, all of it had combined to make her react in ways she normally wouldn't. Still, as Jade made her way to the bathroom to splash cool water on her face, she couldn't forget the gentle way Roman's thumb had wiped away her tear, or the undeniable flutter in her stomach when he had touched her. Worse, she couldn't ignore the way her body had instinctively leaned into his touch, seeking more of that unexpected tenderness. The woman in the mirror she could not see had been betrayed by her own mother, sold to a stranger, and now, inexplicably, was responding to that stranger's touch like a flower turning toward the sun. The irony was not lost on Jade as she changed into her nightclothes and slipped beneath the luxurious sheets of her bed. Outside, the storm continued to rage, wind howling around the corners of the house, rain lashing against the windows. Inside, another kind of storm was brewing, one that frightened Jade far more than thunder or lightning ever could. She lay awake for hours, listening to the chaos of nature and trying to ignore the chaos in her heart, where the memory of Roman's touch still burned like an ember refusing to die. In his own room across the house, Roman stood at the window, watching the storm tear through the night. He flexed his hand, still feeling the softness of Jade's skin beneath his fingers, the way she had leaned into his touch. Her tears had undone him completely. In that moment, he had wanted nothing more than to pull her into his arms to protect her from whatever had caused those tears to fall. The desire had shocked him with its intensity. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. He had brought Jade here to protect her, to keep her safe from the consequences of her mother's mistakes. His attraction to her had been aesthetic, distant, appreciation for her talent, admiration for her beauty. But tonight, Something had shifted, becoming dangerously personal. Roman pressed his forehead against the cool glass of the window, trying to regain his composure. He had to be careful. Jade was vulnerable, dependent on him in ways that created an imbalance he refused to exploit. Whatever this strange pull between them was, he would not act on it, could not act on it. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the grounds in stark white light. In that flash, Roman saw himself reflected in the glass, a man standing alone in the darkness, haunted by ghosts he thought he'd laid to rest. He turned away from the window, away from his reflection, but he couldn't turn away from the truth. Something had awakened in him tonight, something he had believed died, along with his heart years ago. As the thunder rumbled overhead, both Jade and Roman lay awake in separate rooms of the same house, each trying to deny the spark that had ignited between them, a spark that threatened to grow into a flame neither was prepared to control. Chapter 4. Surrender to Music. Morning arrived with gentle persistence, sunlight warming Jade's face through the curtains she had left partially open. The storm had passed, leaving behind a washed-clean world that smelled of rain-soaked earth and renewal. Jade sat up slowly, her mind immediately returning to the previous night, to Roman's touch, to the inexplicable warmth that had spread through her at the contact. She shook her head, trying to dispel the memory. It meant nothing. A moment of weakness during a disorienting situation, nothing more. Today, she would be stronger, more guarded. After showering and dressing in a simple sundress she found in the closet, the fabric impossibly soft against her skin, Jade decided to venture out. Mrs. Bennet had mentioned a garden on the east side of the house, with paths designed for easy navigation. The thought of fresh air and the scent of flowers after the rain appealed to Jade's senses. She made her way through the house, her cane tapping a steady rhythm against the floors. The mansion was quiet. Roman was likely at work, attending to whatever business had made him wealthy enough to casually clear someone's gambling debts. The thought should have comforted her. His absence meant she could explore without the tension his presence created, but instead she felt a strange disappointment. Pushing this unwelcome feeling aside, Jade found the glass doors that Mrs. Bennet had described leading to the garden. The handles were ornate beneath her fingers, cool metal shaped into intricate patterns. They opened with a soft click, and immediately the sense of the garden enveloped her. Roses, jasmine, something citrusy, and the rich smell of damp soil. The path beneath her feet was smooth stone, slightly damp from the night's rain. Jade moved slowly, enjoying the warmth of the sun on her skin and the gentle sounds of nature, birds calling to each other, insects humming, leaves rustling in the soft breeze. Here, away from the confines of the house, she felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. She followed the path until it curved around what Mrs. Bennet had described as a gazebo. Curious, Jade stepped carefully up the 3 stairs, her cane confirming each step before she committed her weight. Inside the gazebo, the air was cooler, filtered through the wooden lattice that surrounded it. She found a bench and sat, tilting, her face toward the sun that streamed through the open roof. For the first time since arriving at Roman's estate, Jade felt a measure of peace. The garden reminded her of the small community park where her grandmother had taken her as a child, before the accident that stole her sight. She could almost hear her grandmother's gentle voice describing the colors of the flowers, teaching Jade to identify them by their scents and the shapes of their petals. Lost in memory, Jade began to sing softly, an old lullaby her grandmother had taught her. Her voice, rich and soulful, filled the small space of the gazebo before drifting out into the garden. Singing had always been Jade's refuge, her connection to a world that had become increasingly distant after losing her sight. When she sang, She felt whole again, unburdened by the darkness that surrounded her. The song spilled from her lips without conscious thought, rising and falling with the natural emotion that had made her stand out at the community center where Roman had first heard her. She sang of love and loss, of hope that persists even in darkness, her voice carrying feelings she rarely allowed herself to acknowledge. So absorbed was she in the music that Jade didn't hear the approaching footsteps. Until they were quite close, she stopped abruptly, her head turning toward the sound. "Please," Roman's voice was hushed, reverent. "Don't stop on my account." Heat rushed to Jade's cheeks. "I didn't realize anyone was listening," she said, embarrassed to have been caught in such a vulnerable moment. "I didn't mean to intrude," Roman replied, and Jade could hear him shift his weight on the gazebo steps. "I came home early and heard singing from the garden. I thought I was imagining things at first." Jade's fingers twisted in her lap. "I thought you'd be at work all day." "I had planned to be, but I found myself distracted." There was a pause, pregnant with unspoken thoughts. "Your voice is extraordinary, Jade, even more beautiful than I remembered." The compliment sent warmth spreading through her chest. "Thank you," she murmured, unsure how else to respond. "May I join you?" Roman asked, still standing at the edge of the gazebo. Jade hesitated, then nodded, moving slightly to make more room on the bench. She heard the wooden boards creak as Roman stepped into the gazebo and sat beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "That song," he said after a moment. "It's not one I've heard before. My grandmother taught it to me. She came from Louisiana. It's an old Creole lullaby. It's beautiful." Roman's voice had taken on a quality Jade hadn't heard before, something soft and almost wistful. "You have a gift." Jade shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I used to dream of being a singer. Before," she gestured vaguely toward her eyes. "Your blindness doesn't change your talent," Roman said firmly. "If anything, I think it may enhance it. You feel music in a way many sighted people never learn to do." The observation surprised her. Most people either pitied her blindness or awkwardly pretended it didn't exist. Roman's matter-of-fact acknowledgement, coupled with his insight, caught her off guard. "Do you play any instruments?" she asked, changing the subject. "Piano," Roman answered, "though not nearly as well as I'd like. It was my mother's passion, and she insisted I learn. After she died, playing became my way of keeping her memory alive." The casual mention of personal loss created a sudden intimacy between them. This was the first truly personal thing Roman had shared, and Jade found herself wanting to know more. "When did she die?" she asked softly. "When I was 14. Cancer." His voice remained steady, but Jade sensed the old pain beneath the words. "My father threw himself into his work afterward. The piano became my companion during some lonely years." "I'm sorry," Jade said, meaning it. Despite everything, she couldn't help but respond to the quiet grief in his voice. "It was a long time ago." Roman shifted on the bench. "Would you like to hear me play sometime? There's a grand piano in the music room that rarely gets the attention. It deserves—" The invitation seemed innocent enough, yet Jade felt her pulse quicken at the thought of sharing music with him. It felt dangerously intimate, yet the prospect excited her in a way she didn't want to examine too closely. "I'd like that," she heard herself say. They sat in surprisingly comfortable silence for several minutes, the sun warming them as birds called to each other in the garden beyond. Jade became acutely aware of Roman's presence beside her, the subtle scent of his cologne, the sound of his breathing, the slight shift of the bench when he moved. "Would you show me now?" she asked suddenly, surprising herself with her boldness. "Now?" Roman sounded equally surprised. "Unless you have work to return to," Jade added, suddenly uncertain. "No, Roman cleared his throat. "I'd be honored. But I should warn you, I'm out of practice." They rose together, and without thinking, Jade reached out, her hand finding Roman's arm. The contact sent that now familiar heat through her fingertips, but she didn't pull away. It was practical to allow him to guide her back to the house, she told herself, ignoring the way her heart beat a little faster at the solid feel of his muscle beneath her touch. Roman led her through the garden and back into the house, describing their path as they walked. His voice created a map she could follow, his words painting pictures her eyes could no longer see. They passed through corridors Jade hadn't explored yet, until the sound of their footsteps changed, echoing slightly, in what must have been a larger space. "The music room," Roman announced, guiding her forward. "The piano is straight ahead. French doors to the right lead to a terrace. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves on the left wall hold sheet music and vinyl records." Jade's cane touched something. Solid, the piano, she realized. She ran her hand along its smooth, polished surface, following the curve until she found the keyboard cover. With reverent fingers, she lifted it, revealing the keys beneath. She pressed one gently, the clear note hanging in the air between them. "It's perfectly tuned," she observed, impressed. "I have it maintained regularly, even though I rarely play anymore." Roman moved closer, and Jade felt the slight stirring of air as he sat on the bench. "May I?" She stepped back, giving him space. The bench creaked slightly as he settled himself, and then his fingers touched the keys. The first few notes were hesitant, almost shy, but quickly gained confidence as Roman surrendered to the music. The piece was something classical that Jade recognized but couldn't name, melancholy and beautiful, filled with longing. Jade closed her eyes, though it made no difference to her vision. The music washed over her, through her, each note resonating. In her chest, Roman played with surprising passion, his technical imperfections overwhelmed by the emotion he poured into the piece. Jade found herself swaying slightly, drawn into the story the music told, one of loss and remembrance, of beauty touched by sadness. When the final notes faded, the silence that followed seemed sacred. Jade realized she had moved closer to the piano during the performance, drawn by the music like a moth to flame. "That was beautiful," she whispered, afraid to break the spell the music had cast. "Chopin," Roman said, his voice equally soft. "My mother's favorite." Impulsively, Jade stepped forward, her hand finding the piano again. "May I sit with you?" She heard Roman's sharp intake of breath, felt the tension that suddenly filled the air between them. For a moment, she thought he might refuse, but then he moved over on the bench, making space for her. Jade sat carefully, acutely aware of how close they were now, their shoulders almost touching. The warmth of his body radiated against her side, and she caught that now familiar scent that was uniquely his. "Will you play something else?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Roman's hands returned to the keys, and this time he played. Something lighter, more hopeful. Without thinking, Jade began to hum along, finding the melody and following it. Roman faltered for a moment, then adjusted, his playing becoming an accompaniment to her voice. They hadn't rehearsed, had never played together, yet somehow they found a harmony that seemed predestined. When Jade began to sing words, making them up as she went, letting the music guide her, Roman followed, adjusting the rhythm and dynamics to complement her vocals. It was magic. There was no other word for it. The music flowed between them, around them, through them, creating a connection that transcended their complicated circumstances. In this moment, they weren't captor and captive, benefactor and charge. They were simply two souls speaking the universal language of music. When the improvised song came to its natural conclusion, they sat in silence, both slightly breathless from the unexpected intimacy of what they had just shared. Jade's heart was racing, her skin tingling with awareness of the man beside her. "I've never experienced anything quite like that," Roman said quietly, breaking the silence. "Neither have I," Jade admitted. Roman shifted on the bench, turning slightly toward her. "You're remarkable, Jade Walker." The compliment sent heat rushing to her cheeks. Before she could respond, Roman stood abruptly, the bench shifting beneath her at his sudden movement. "I should let you rest before dinner," he said, his voice suddenly formal again. "Mrs. Bennet will serve at 7, if you'd care to join me." Jade nodded, confused by his sudden withdrawal but also relieved. The intensity of what had passed between them frightened her. It was too soon, too complicated, too dangerous to her carefully constructed defenses. "I'll see you at dinner, then," she said, rising from the bench. Roman guided her back to the main part of the house, his hand lightly touching her elbow. At the entrance to her suite, he paused. "Thank you," he said simply, "for the music." Then he was gone, his footsteps receding down the hallway, leaving Jade standing at her door, with her heart still beating too fast, and her mind filled with confusion. She had come to this house determined to hate him, to keep her emotional walls firmly in place. Yet in the span of a single day, those walls had begun to crumble, all because of a shared song and the inexplicable connection it had created. As Jade entered her suite and closed the door behind her, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between them, something neither of them had anticipated, and neither was prepared to control. Chapter 5. Night of Confessions. Dinner had been a strangely intimate affair. Mrs. Bennet had prepared a meal that delighted Jade's senses. Herb-roasted chicken with flavors so complex they seemed to dance. On her tongue, vegetables still crisp and fresh, warm bread that released clouds of fragrant steam when broken. Roman had described each dish as it was served, his voice creating images that compensated for what her eyes could not see. Their conversation had flowed more easily than Jade would have thought possible a week ago. They had discussed music primarily, composers they admired, performances that had moved them, the emotional power of different instruments. Roman had revealed a depth of knowledge that surprised her, speaking with passion about Bach's mathematical precision and the raw emotion of blues guitarists with equal appreciation. Now, hours later, Jade lay in bed, replaying the evening in her mind. It troubled her how easily she had forgotten her circumstances during dinner, how readily she had laughed at Roman's dry wit, how comfortable she had felt in his presence. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to endure this arrangement, not enjoy it. She was supposed to remain distant, not find herself leaning toward his voice across the table, hungry for more of his words. Sleep eluded her, thoughts chasing themselves in endless circles. Just as she was beginning to drift off, a cry pierced. The darkness, raw and pained, jerking her fully awake. Jade sat up, heart pounding, disoriented for a moment before realizing the sound had come from somewhere else in the house. Another cry came, this one more of a shout, wordless and anguished. "Roman, it had to be Roman." Without stopping to consider her actions, Jade slipped from bed and grabbed her robe, tying it hastily around her waist. She found her cane, leaning against the nightstand, and made her way to the door, pulled by an instinct she couldn't name. The house was silent now, but Jade remembered Roman mentioning that his bedroom was in the west wing, down the corridor past the library. She moved cautiously through the darkened house, one hand trailing along the wall, her cane sweeping before her. The mansion was different at night, cooler, filled with subtle sounds that changed the acoustic landscape she navigated. At the entrance to the west wing, Jade hesitated. What was she doing? This was madness. Venturing through an unfamiliar house in the middle of the night, searching for a man who had essentially bought her from her mother. She should turn back, return to her room, mind her own business. Another sound reached her, not a shout this time, but a low moan that held such pain it made Jade's chest tighten. Before she could reconsider, she continued forward, counting doors until she reached what she believed must be Roman's bedroom. "Roman," she called softly, knocking lightly on the door. No answer came, but she heard movement inside. Restless, agitated. She tried the handle and found it unlocked. Taking a deep breath, Jade pushed the door open. The room smelled of him, that now familiar scent of sandalwood and something uniquely masculine. She could hear his breathing, fast and uneven, coming from what must be the bed. "Roman," she called. Again, louder this time. "Are you all right?" A sudden intake of breath, then, "Jade!" His voice was rough, disoriented. "What are you? How did you—" "I heard you cry out," she explained, moving cautiously into the room. Her cane hit something, likely the foot of the bed, and she stopped. "You sounded distressed." The bedsheets rustled as Roman sat up. "I'm sorry I disturbed you," he said, his voice still ragged. "It was just a dream." "A nightmare?" Jade asked softly. A long pause followed. "Yes," Roman finally admitted. "An old one that visits occasionally." Jade hesitated, uncertain what to do now that she was here. She should leave, give him privacy, return to her own room. Instead, she asked, "Do you want to talk about it?" Another rustle of bedding, followed by the sound of feet touching the floor. "You don't need to concern yourself with my demons, Jade. We all have them," she said simply. "Sometimes speaking them aloud diminishes their power." Roman gave a soft, humorless laugh. "That sounds like experience talking." "It is." Jade took a chance and moved forward, her cane guiding her until she found what felt like an armchair. She sat, settling her cane across her lap. "My grandmother taught me that. After I lost my sight, the nightmares were frequent. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft sound of Roman's breathing gradually slowing to a normal rhythm. When he finally spoke, his voice came from closer than before. He had moved to sit near her. "It's always the same dream," he said quietly. "I'm back in the car, watching it happen all over again, powerless to stop it." Jade waited, giving him space to continue or retreat as he needed. "My wife," Roman said, the words seeming to cost him something vital. "Elise. We were driving home from a charity event 4 years ago. It was raining, a storm not unlike the one we had the other night. The car hydroplaned on a curve." His voice faltered, and Jade found herself reaching out instinctively. Her hand found his in the darkness, and she squeezed gently, offering anchor. "We crashed through the guardrail," Roman continued, his hand turning to hold hers tightly. "The car rolled down an embankment. I was thrown clear somehow, but Elise—" He drew a shaking breath. She was trapped. I could hear her calling for me, but I couldn't get to her before the car caught fire. "Roman," Jade whispered, her heart breaking for him. "I'm so sorry. The dream is always the same. I can see her through the flames, can hear her screaming. My name, but I can't reach her. I never reach her." His grip on her hand had become almost painful, but Jade didn't pull away. This pain was nothing compared to what he had endured, what he still endured every time the nightmare returned. "It wasn't your fault," she said softly. "That's what everyone said at the funeral. That's what my therapist repeated for months afterward." Roman's voice had taken on a bitter edge, but they weren't there. They didn't see the way she looked at me through that window, didn't hear her voice when she realized I couldn't save her. Jade felt tears forming in her eyes, moved beyond words by the raw grief in his voice. Without thinking, she rose from the chair and followed his voice, her free hand finding his shoulder. She sat beside him on what she now realized was the edge of his bed. "I understand guilt," she said quietly. "After I lost my sight, I blamed myself for years. If I had been more careful, if I had listened to my mother's warnings about playing near the construction site, I tortured myself with what-ifs until my grandmother made me understand that blaming myself wouldn't restore my sight. It would only steal whatever joy I might still find in life." Roman's shoulder tensed beneath her hand. "Joy hasn't been a In priority, since Elise died. That doesn't mean you don't deserve it, Jade replied, her voice gentle but firm. Elise wouldn't want you to live haunted by her memory. You didn't know her. No, Jade acknowledged. But I know enough about love to understand that those who truly love us want our happiness above all else. Roman's hand tightened around hers again, but the quality of the pressure had changed. Less desperate now, more like someone holding onto a lifeline they hadn't realized they needed. After Elise died, I threw myself into work, he said after a long moment, built my company into something much larger, more successful. But the bigger it grew, the emptier I felt. The house became just a place to sleep between meetings, until he stopped abruptly, and Jade felt him turn toward her. Their faces were close now, close enough that she could feel his breath against her cheek when he spoke again. Until I heard you sing, he finished softly. Something woke up inside me that day, something I thought had died with Elise. The confession hung in the air between them, charged with implications neither was ready to fully acknowledge. Jade's heart pounded so loudly she was certain Roman must hear it. That frightens you, she said, a statement rather than a question. Yes, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Almost as much as it frightens you. Jade couldn't deny it. The attraction between them, for that's what it was, impossible and inconvenient as it might be, terrified her. Not just because of their circumstances, but because of what it demanded. Vulnerability, trust, the risk of further heartbreak. We hardly know each other, she whispered, even as her body seemed to sway toward his of its own accord. I know. Roman agreed, his voice rough with emotion. And yet I feel like I've been waiting to hear your voice my entire life. His hand released hers, only to reach up and gently touch her face. Jade froze as his fingers traced the curve of her cheek with exquisite tenderness, then moved to brush a strand of hair behind her ear. Her skin tingled wherever he touched, sending ripples of warmth through her entire body. I should go. She said, the words barely audible. You should, Roman agreed, his fingers still tracing the line of her jaw. We both know this is complicated. Neither moved. The silence between them grew heavy with unspoken desires, with the tension of bodies yearning to move closer while minds counseled retreat. Then a sound broke the spell, thunder, distant but approaching. Another storm was rolling in. You'll never find your way back to your room in the dark if the power goes out again, Roman said, his hand finally falling away from her face. Let me walk you there, Jade nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They rose together, and Roman guided her from his room with a light touch at her elbow. The journey back to her suite passed in charged silence, broken only by Roman's occasional warnings about steps or turns. At her door, they paused again. The air between them seemed to crackle, with everything left unsaid, with possibilities neither was brave enough to seize. Thank you, Roman said finally, for coming to check on me, for listening. Thank you for trusting me with your story, Jade replied softly. His hand came up to touch her face one more time, a fleeting caress that left her skin burning. Good night, Jade. Good night, Roman. She slipped into her room, closing the door behind her, then leaned against it, her heart still racing. Outside, the storm drew closer, thunder rumbling like a physical manifestation of the tumult in her chest. What was happening to her? How had this man, this stranger who had bought her freedom from her mother's debts, come to affect her so deeply in such a short time? Jade made her way back to bed, but sleep remained elusive. Her mind kept returning to the painful vulnerability in Roman's voice as he spoke of his wife, to the gentle touch of his fingers on her face, to the heat that had built between them as they sat together in the darkness of his bedroom. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had come to his house determined to endure her captivity with cold dignity, to keep her heart locked safely away until the month was over and she could reclaim her freedom. Instead, with each passing day, with each new revelation, the lines between captor and captive, benefactor and charge, were blurring into something she couldn't define and didn't dare name. As the storm broke overhead, rain lashing against her windows, Jade finally surrendered to exhaustion. Her last conscious thought was of Roman's face, illuminated by lightning during that first storm, the unexpected softness in his eyes as he had wiped away her tears, and the dangerous hope that had taken root in her heart despite all her efforts to prevent it. Chapter 6. Consuming Flames. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through Jade's windows, but she had been awake for hours, her mind replaying every moment of the previous night. Roman's confession about his wife's death had shifted something fundamental between them. What had begun as an arrangement born of desperation had become something far more complex, a connection neither had anticipated nor sought. When she made her way to the dining room, guided by the now familiar scents of coffee and freshly baked bread, Jade sensed immediately that Roman wasn't there. Mrs. Bennet informed her he had an early meeting in the city, but would return that afternoon. Alone. With her thoughts, Jade spent the morning in the garden, then retreated to the library when the sun grew too warm. Time stretched endlessly without Roman's presence. By late afternoon, restlessness drove her to the music room. The piano stood silent, waiting, like a promise unfulfilled. Lost in thought, she didn't hear the approaching footsteps until they were just outside the door. Roman's scent reached her a moment before he spoke. "I hoped I might find you here." Jade's heart leapt at the sound of his voice. "You were gone early." "A meeting I couldn't reschedule," Roman explained, moving closer. "But I thought of you the entire time." "Last night," Roman continued when she didn't respond, "I crossed a line. I apologize if I made you uncomfortable." "You didn't," Jade said softly. "That's what frightens me." "What are we doing, Roman?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't what either of us planned." "No," he agreed, sitting beside her on the piano bench. "It isn't." "I've spent the day trying to convince myself that this is wrong," Roman said. "That I should maintain distance, that our circumstances make any connection between us inappropriate." Jade turned toward him. "And did you convince yourself?" Not for a single moment. His hand found hers on the piano keys. "The more I tried to talk myself out of what I'm feeling, the more certain I became that I've never wanted anything more than to be near you. This is madness. We barely know each other." "Then let me know you," Roman whispered, his hand gently touching her face. "And let me be known by you, not as the man who made an arrangement with your mother, but as the man who hasn't felt truly alive until you came into his home." His words broke something open inside her. Jade's hand moved of its own accord, reaching up to touch his face as he touched hers. Her fingers traced the strong line of his jaw, the slight stubble that scratched pleasantly against her palm, the curve of his lips. "I've never seen you," she whispered. "Let me see you now." Roman remained perfectly still as Jade's fingers moved over his features, reading him like Braille. She traced his eyebrows, the straight bridge of his nose, the slight hollows beneath his cheekbones. "You're beautiful," she whispered. "Jade," he breathed her name like a prayer. "May I kiss you?" Instead of answering, she leaned forward. Their lips met with gentle hesitation that quickly gave way to hunger. Roman's mouth was warm and soft against hers, his kiss both reverent and possessive. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Roman rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the moment I saw you." "Even when I was cold and hostile?" Jade asked, a hint of teasing in her breathless voice. "Especially then. Your defiance was magnificent." She kissed him again, unable to resist the magnetic pull between them. This time there was no hesitation. Roman's arms enveloped her completely, lifting her from the piano bench into his lap. The change in position brought her curves against the hard planes of his chest, eliciting a soft gasp that he captured with his mouth. "We should stop," Roman murmured against her throat, even as his lips continued to trace a burning path along her skin. "This is moving too fast." "Is it?" Jade asked, her head falling back. "It feels like we've been moving toward this since the beginning." "You deserve better than this, better than rushed passion on a piano bench." Jade's hands framed his face. "What I deserve is to make my own choices. And I choose this. I choose you." Something broke in Roman then, the last of his restraint shattering, like glass. He stood in one fluid motion, lifting Jade with him. "Hold on to me," he commanded softly, and she wrapped her arms around his neck as he carried her from the music room. Roman carried her through the house to her suite, his stride, purposeful but unhurried. When they reached her door, he paused. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice tight with restraint. In answer, Jade found his lips again, pouring everything she couldn't say into the kiss. Inside, he laid her gently on the bed. The room was filled with afternoon sunlight, warming their skin as Roman hovered above her. "I need to hear you say it, Jade," he insisted. "I need to know this is what you truly want." "I want you," she whispered. "I've never been more certain of anything." What followed was a symphony of discovery, their first true exploration of each other. Roman's hands and lips moved across her body with reverent hesitation, like a man granted access to something sacred. His touch was questioning, learning, each caress asking permission as he slowly undressed her. "Tell me what you like," he whispered against her collarbone. "Guide me. Just touch me," she breathed, unused to being asked, unused to her pleasure being prioritized. "Everywhere." Jade's hands were equally curious but more tentative, unbuttoning his shirt with fingers that trembled slightly. She discovered the firm planes of his chest, the unexpected softness of the light dusting of hair that narrowed to a trail disappearing beneath his waistband. When her fingers found raised lines on his shoulder and side, she paused. "From the accident?" she asked softly. "Yes," Roman replied, his breath catching as her touch lingered there. Jade pressed tender kisses to each scar, intuiting that these marks represented wounds far deeper than skin. She felt him tremble beneath her lips, vulnerability and desire, intertwining as barriers between them fell away with each tender touch. When they were finally skin to skin, Roman's weight a delicious pressure above her, Jade felt tears prick behind her eyelids. This closeness transcended physical desire. It was a communion of souls that transcended their complicated beginnings. "You're crying," Roman whispered, catching a tear with his thumb. "It's just, I didn't expect to feel so much." Their bodies moved together with a rhythm as natural as the music they had created at the piano. Roman whispered her name like a litany, his voice breaking with emotion as they climbed toward ecstasy together. When release finally claimed them, Roman gathered Jade against his chest, his heart pounding beneath her ear, his arms holding her, as if she were precious. They lay entwined as afternoon faded to evening, speaking occasionally in soft murmurs, but mostly content in peaceful silence. Roman's fingers traced lazy patterns on Jade's bare shoulder while her hand rested over his heart. "What happens now?" Jade finally asked. Roman's arms tightened around her. "Whatever you want to happen," he said. "I meant what I said before. You're not a prisoner here, Jade. You never were. And if what I want is to stay," she asked, her voice small with vulnerability, "then you would make me the happiest man alive," Roman replied without hesitation. Jade pushed herself up on one elbow, her hand finding his face. "I never thought I could feel this way," she admitted, "especially not with the man who bought me from my mother." "The man who saved you from a life you were drowning in," Jade corrected gently. I understand now what you did for me. Roman's hand cradled her face. You deserve all that and more, Jade, so much more. As they drifted towards sleep in each other's arms, Jade realized that the mansion no longer felt like a gilded cage. Somewhere between bitter resentment and passionate surrender, it had become something else entirely, something that felt remarkably like home. Chapter 7. Hearts Divided. The 2 weeks that followed were the happiest of Jade's life. Each day brought new discoveries about Roman, his dry humor that emerged when he was truly comfortable, his unexpected passion for cooking that manifested in elaborate Sunday breakfasts, his habit of humming classical music when deep in thought. Each night brought them closer, their bodies and souls connecting in ways that left them both transformed. Roman had begun taking more time away from work, eager to return home to Jade. They spent hours in the music room, creating songs together that seemed to flow from some shared consciousness. In the garden, they walked arm in arm as Roman described the colors of flowers in poetic detail, painting pictures with words that Jade could see in her mind's eye. In the library, they read to each other, Roman sharing his favorite novels, while Jade introduced him to the power of spoken poetry. Their physical relationship deepened with each passing day. Roman worshipped Jade's body with reverent dedication, memorizing every curve, every spot that made her gasp or sigh. Jade explored him with equal devotion, her sensitive fingers mapping the landscape of his body until she knew him better than she had ever known anyone. You've awakened something in me I thought died with Elise, Roman confessed one night as they lay tangled in the sheets of what had become their shared bed. I never thought I could feel this way again. Never thought. I deserved to. Jade had silenced him with a kiss, then shown him with her body just how deserving of love and pleasure he was. Later, as Roman slept beside her, she had marveled at the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. Her mother's desperate bargain had led to a connection so profound it seemed destined. Now, preparing for a charity gala, Roman was hosting at the mansion. Jade couldn't quite believe how much her life had changed in just 3 weeks. Mrs. Bennet had helped her choose a dress, midnight blue silk that flowed like water over her curves. Roman had described it as breathtaking when she'd modeled it for him, his voice rough with emotion and desire. You'll be the most beautiful woman there, he had promised, pressing a kiss to her bare shoulder. I'll be the envy of every man in attendance. Jade had laughed, both flattered and nervous. This would be her first public appearance as Roman's. What exactly? They hadn't put a label on what they had become to each other, but there was no denying the depth of their connection. As the hour of the gala approached, Jade sat at her vanity, applying the finishing touches to her makeup with practiced precision, honed over years of compensating for her blindness. Her fingers traced her face, checking for any smudges or imperfections. Satisfied, she rose and felt for the delicate silver necklace Roman had given her that morning, a teardrop pendant that nestled in the hollow of her throat. It's perfect, he had said as he fastened it around her neck. Beautiful but strong, just like you. A knock at the door pulled Jade from her memories. Come in, she called, expecting Mrs. Bennet. You take my breath away, Roman's voice came, instead filled with undisguised admiration. His footsteps approached, and then his hands were on her waist, turning her gently toward him. I'm going to have a hard time concentrating on our guests tonight, Jade smiled, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the fine fabric of his tuxedo beneath her palms. You don't clean up so badly yourself, she teased, though in truth the crisp scent of his cologne and the solid warmth of him in formal wear made her heart race. Roman's lips found hers in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened with familiar hunger. Jade melted against him, her body responding instantly to his touch. With reluctance, Roman finally pulled away. If we continue this, "We'll miss our own party," he murmured against her hair. "And while I'd much rather spend the evening alone, with you, there are 200 guests about to arrive who might notice our absence." Jade laughed, adjusting his bow tie that she had inadvertently disturbed. "Responsibility calls, Mr. Carter." He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "Mrs. Bennet will come for you when the guests have arrived. I need to greet them, but I want to make your entrance special." After Roman left, Jade paced her room, nervous energy making it impossible to sit still. This would be her first formal event since losing her sight. Her first time meeting Roman's friends and business associates. How would they see her? As Roman's blind charity case? As an object of pity or curiosity? The thoughts made her stomach twist with anxiety. When Mrs. Bennet finally came to escort her, Jade took a deep breath and followed the housekeeper through the house. The sounds of the gala reached her before they arrived. The murmur of conversation, the clink of glasses, the subtle background of string quartet music. "Mr. Carter is waiting at the bottom of the stairs," Mrs. Bennet said quietly as they approached the grand staircase that led down to the main hall. "There are 18 steps, with a handrail on your right." Jade nodded gratefully, her hand finding the polished wood of the banister. As she began her descent, the conversations below gradually quieted. She could feel eyes on her, but kept her focus on the rhythm of her steps, on maintaining the grace her grandmother had insisted upon even after blindness had taken her sight. The bottom of the stairs, Roman's hand caught hers, warm and reassuring. "You're magnificent," he whispered for her ears alone, then tucked her hand into the crook of his arm. What followed was a whirlwind of introductions and conversations. Roman stayed close, subtly guiding her through the crowd, quietly describing people or surroundings when needed. Many guests were genuinely warm, engaging Jade in conversation about music when Roman mentioned her talent. Others were politely distant, their discomfort with her blindness evident in their stiff responses and quick retreats. Through it all, Roman remained attentive and proud, his hand often finding the small of her back in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. Jade felt herself relaxing as the evening progressed, gaining confidence from his unwavering support. "Would you sing for us, Miss Walker?" asked an elderly man Roman had introduced as a longtime family friend. "Roman tells us you have the voice of an angel." Before Jade could respond, Roman intervened smoothly. "Another time, perhaps. Jade isn't prepared to perform tonight." The protectiveness in his tone warmed her heart. Later, as they stood near the refreshment table enjoying a moment of relative quiet, Jade leaned into Roman's side. "Thank you for that," she murmured, "for not putting me on display." His arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer. "You're never a performance, Jade. Not to me." The moment of intimacy was interrupted by a woman's voice. Cool, cultured, with an edge that immediately set Jade on alert. "Roman, darling, how terribly rude of you not to greet me properly." The voice was cultured and melodic, with the practiced charm of old money and private schools. Jade felt Roman stiffen beside her, his arm tightening almost imperceptibly around her waist. "Olivia," he acknowledged, his voice carefully neutral. "I didn't realize you were on the guest list." "Your assistant was kind enough to add me when I called," the woman replied, with a subtle edge beneath her honeyed tone. "After all, we have such a long history together. Father still speaks so highly of you, despite, well, everything. I couldn't possibly miss your first public event in... How long has it been since Elise? Almost 4 years." Jade could sense the deliberate cruelty in how Olivia wielded Roman's late wife's name like a weapon. This wasn't just a jealous ex. This was someone who knew exactly how to inflict pain with surgical precision. The casual mention of his late wife struck Jade like a physical blow. The tension in Roman's body told her this Olivia knew exactly what she was doing. "Olivia, this is Jade Walker," Roman said, his voice tight. "Jade, Olivia Reynolds is an old friend." Friend? Olivia's laugh was musical but sharp-edged. "Is that what we're calling it now? How quaint." Roman's discomfort was palpable. "If you'll excuse us, Olivia, I need to check with the caterers." "Of course, darling. We'll catch up later." Her voice dipped lower, more intimate. "We have so much to discuss." As Roman guided Jade away, she could feel the waves of tension radiating from him. "Who is she?" Jade asked quietly once they were out of earshot. Roman sighed, his hand running through his hair in a gesture Jade had come to recognize as discomfort. "Olivia is complicated. We were briefly involved after Elise died. It wasn't serious, at least not on my part, but on hers." Jade pressed, a cold feeling settling in her stomach. "She had expectations I couldn't meet," Roman admitted. "I ended things about 6 months ago." 6 months. The timeline triggered something in Jade's memory. Teresa, arranging the deal with Roman, his sudden interest in helping them. Had it all been a rebound from this Olivia woman? The thought sent ice through Jade's veins. "Roman," a male voice interrupted before Jade could pursue her questions. "The mayor wants a word." "I'll be right there," Roman replied, then turned back to Jade. "Will you be all right for a few minutes?" Jade nodded, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "Go, I'll be fine." As Roman moved away, Jade found herself adrift in the crowd. She made her way carefully to what she hoped was a quiet corner, needing space to process this new information. Before she could gather her thoughts, the subtle scent of expensive perfume announced Olivia's presence. "Alone at last," the woman said, her voice honey-sweet with underlying venom. "I've been so looking forward to meeting Roman's latest project." Jade straightened her spine, refusing to be intimidated. "I'm no one's project, Ms. Reynolds. Please call me Olivia," she insisted with false warmth. "After all, we have so much in common. We've both shared Roman's bed, though I must say you moved in rather quickly. It took me months to get that far." The crude implication made Jade's cheeks burn. "I think this conversation is over." "Oh, but I've barely begun," Olivia continued, moving closer. "Has he told you about our engagement?" "No? How strange. We were planning the wedding when he suddenly developed cold feet, just 6 months ago, actually." Jade felt as if the floor were tilting beneath her. "You're lying." "Am I?" Olivia's voice dripped with false sympathy. "Oh, darling, Roman has such a habit of rescuing broken things when he's feeling guilty. First me, after that disastrous business. Deal with my father. Now you, blind and poor and so very needy. He does love playing the hero." Each word struck Jade like a physical blow. "You don't know anything about us." "I know Roman," Olivia countered. "I know how he operates. Find something damaged, fix it, then move on when it becomes too real. Ask yourself, did he pursue you right after meeting you? Did he offer solutions to all your problems? Make you feel special, cherished, like you're the only woman who truly understands him?" The questions hit too close to home, echoing Jade's own insecurities. Had it all been some kind of savior complex on Roman's part? Was she just the latest in a pattern? "He'll tire of you," Olivia continued, her voice almost pitying now. "Once the novelty wears off, once you're no longer a distraction from his grief and guilt. I just thought you deserved to know what you're getting into. One woman to another." Before Jade could respond, Olivia's perfume receded, leaving her alone with thoughts that spiraled darkly. The gala continued around her, voices and music blurring into a cacophony that matched her internal turmoil. When Roman finally returned to her side, Jade flinched at his touch. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, concern evident in his voice. "Did something happen? Were you engaged to Olivia?" Jade asked directly, her voice low but intense. Roman's sharp intake of breath was answer enough. "Not officially, no. But you were planning to be." Jade pressed, her heart constricting painfully. It was a mistake, Roman admitted, his voice tight. I was in a bad place after the anniversary of Elise's death. Olivia had been pursuing me for months. I convinced myself it was time to move on, that Elise would have wanted that. And now, Jade asked, her voice barely above a whisper, am I another mistake, another attempt to move on? Jade, no. Roman reached for her, but she stepped back, maintaining distance. What happened with Olivia has nothing to do with us. What I feel for you is entirely different, deeper, more real than anything I've felt since Elise. How convenient for you to say that now, Jade replied, hurt, making her voice sharp. Did you plan this from the beginning? See the poor blind girl, another broken thing to fix, another distraction from your guilt? That's not fair, Roman protested, his voice strained. Olivia's been poisoning your mind. Whatever she told you, she told me enough to make me question. Everything about us, Jade cut him off. About your motives, about my own judgment. Jade, please. Roman's voice had taken on a desperate edge. Let's not do this here. Let me explain properly, away from all these people. The rational part of Jade knew he deserved that chance, but the wounded part, the part that had trusted him completely, only to discover he had hidden significant pieces of his recent past, couldn't bear to hear more half-truths or justifications. I need air, she said abruptly, turning away. Roman caught her arm gently. Let me come with you. No, Jade pulled free of his grasp. I need to be alone right now. She made her way through the crowd, one hand extended slightly to navigate around people, moving with the desperate dignity of someone trying not to fall apart publicly. Behind her she could hear Roman calling her name, but she didn't stop. Mrs. Bennet found her in the entrance hall, concern evident in her voice. Miss Walker, are you all right? I need to leave, Jade said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Just for a little while. Is there a car available? Of course, but... Please, Jade interrupted. I just need some space to think. Something in her tone must have conveyed her desperation, because Mrs. Bennet didn't argue further. I'll have Thomas bring the car around. Where would you like to go? Jade hesitated. Where could she go? She had no home apart from Roman's house, no friends nearby, no family she could trust. Then she remembered the elderly neighbor who had been kind to her during her mother's worst episodes, Mrs. Wilson, who lived just a few blocks from her old apartment. Do you know the West Side Gardens apartments? She asked Mrs. Bennet. There's someone there I know. 20 minutes later, Jade sat in the back of a town car, being driven away from the mansion and the man who had become her whole world in just 3 short weeks. Tears streamed silently down her face as the distance between them grew, her heart shattering with each mile. Had it all been a beautiful lie? Roman's passion, his tenderness, his seeming devotion, were they just the practiced moves of a man who collected broken women like some collected art? The thought was unbearable, yet Olivia's poisonous words had planted seeds of doubt that took root in the fertile soil of Jade's insecurities. She had given Roman everything, her trust, her body, her heart. The possibility that she had been merely a replacement, a distraction, a project to occupy his guilty conscience was a betrayal too painful to contemplate. As the car entered the city, Jade wiped away her tears with shaking hands. She had survived her mother's betrayal. She had survived losing her sight. She would survive this too, though at the moment the pain in her chest made her wonder if her heart would ever beat normally again. Back at the mansion, Roman searched frantically for Jade, only to be told by a sympathetic Mrs. Bennet that she had left. The information hit him like a physical blow. She asked to be taken to West Side Gardens apartments, the housekeeper added quietly. She said she knows someone there. Roman ran a hand through his hair, desperation clawing at his chest. I need to go after her. "If I may, sir," Mrs. Bennet said gently, "perhaps give her some time. She seemed very upset." The understated concern in the housekeeper's voice made Roman's stomach clench with guilt and fear. He knew exactly what Olivia was capable of, what poison she could spread with her carefully crafted insinuations. "Cancel the rest of the gala," he instructed. "Make my apologies to the guests. Family emergency." As the last guests departed, Roman paced his study like a caged animal, alternating between calling Jade's phone, which went straight to voicemail, and cursing himself for not being completely honest with her from the beginning. He should have told her about Olivia, should have anticipated that his past would collide with his present in exactly this way. But he had been so caught up in the miracle of finding Jade, in the unexpected joy and passion that had bloomed between them, that he had convinced himself the past no longer mattered. Now that self-deception might cost him the one person who had made him feel truly alive again. As dawn broke over the empty mansion, Roman stood at the window of what had become their bedroom, staring out at the garden where he had first heard Jade sing. The house felt hollow without her presence, as if all the light and warmth had been drained away, leaving only echoing emptiness. "I'll find you," he whispered to the rising sun, "and I'll make this right if it's the last thing I do." But even as he made the promise, Roman feared it might already be too late. The trust between them, fragile and precious, had been shattered. And trust, once broken, was the hardest thing in the world to rebuild. Chapter 8. Dangerous Reunion. Mrs. Wilson's apartment was exactly as Jade remembered, small but meticulously clean, smelling of cinnamon and furniture polish. The elderly woman had welcomed her with genuine concern, asking no questions when she appeared at her door late at night, eyes swollen from crying. She had simply made up the sofa with fresh sheets and heated a mug of cocoa, her weathered hand patting Jade's shoulder with motherly affection. "You stay as long as you need, honey," she had said. "Old Mrs. Wilson's got room enough." 3 days later, Jade sat by the window, sunlight warming her face as she listened to the familiar neighborhood sounds. Children playing, cars honking, music drifting from open windows. After the pristine quiet of Roman's estate, the urban cacophony was both jarring and comforting. Her phone had died the first night, and she hadn't bothered to charge it. What was the point? Roman would be calling, leaving messages she wasn't ready to hear. The pain was still too raw, the doubts too pervasive. Mrs. Wilson had gone to the corner store, promising to return with fresh bread and eggs for lunch. Alone, with her thoughts, Jade found herself drifting back to Roman. Despite Olivia's poisonous words, she couldn't deny the genuine tenderness in his touch, the vulnerability in his voice when he spoke of his late wife, the passion that had ignited between them so unexpectedly. Had it all been a lie? The question tormented her. Perhaps the truth lay somewhere in the middle. Roman had genuine feelings for her, but those feelings were tangled up in his grief, his guilt, his need to rescue. Perhaps a knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Wilson must have forgotten her key again. Jade rose, making her way carefully across the familiar layout of the small apartment. "Coming!" she called, her hand finding the doorknob. She opened the door, a greeting on her lips. "Well, look who it is," a voice said, a voice that sent ice through Jade's veins. "My baby girl, all dressed up like a queen." "Mama?" Jade whispered, instinctively stepping back. Teresa Walker pushed past her daughter into the apartment, her movements jerky with nervous energy. "Surprise, surprise. Heard you were back in the neighborhood. Mrs. Jenkins from 3B saw you arrive. Word travels fast around here." The smell of cheap liquor and stale cigarettes enveloped Jade as her mother moved past her. Some things never changed. "What do you want, Mama?" Can't a mother visit her only daughter? Especially after that daughter ran off with some rich man. Teresa's voice hardened. The same rich man who was supposed to clear my debts. Funny thing is, those men are still coming around saying they never got their money. Jade's blood ran cold. That's not possible. Roman paid them. Teresa laughed. A brittle sound without humor. Seems like your fancy man only paid half what I owed. Said he'd pay the rest when he was satisfied with our arrangement. Her voice twisted the word into something ugly. Then you disappeared with him, and they came looking for me instead. Confusion whirled through Jade's mind. This didn't sound like Roman at all. He wouldn't have lied about paying off the debt. Wouldn't have left Teresa vulnerable to those dangerous men. Would he? I don't believe you, Jade said firmly, though a seed of doubt had been planted. Believe what you want, Teresa snapped. But they're coming for me tonight if I don't have the rest of the money. And since your boyfriend didn't deliver, as promised, that means you and I have a problem. Jade's hand tightened on her cane. I don't have that kind of money, Mama, and even if I did... But you know someone who does, Teresa interrupted. And lucky for us, I found another interested party. Man who's willing to pay good money for a pretty blind girl with a nice singing voice. Works in entertainment, he says. Horror washed over Jade as she realized her mother's intention. You can't be serious. You already sold me once. And look how well that turned out for you. Teresa's voice rose. Living in a mansion, wearing fancy clothes, while your own mother faces God knows what from those loan sharks. I'll call Roman, Jade said, trying to keep her voice steady. He'll clear the debt. You don't need to... Too late for that, Teresa interrupted again. My new friend is already on his way, and he's paying cash up front. Jade backed away, her cane searching for obstacles. I'm not going anywhere with you or your friend, Mama. Don't be difficult, baby girl. Teresa's voice had taken on a wheedling tone Jade remembered all too well from childhood, the voice that preceded her mother's worst decisions. This man has connections. Said he could make you a star with your voice. It's a better deal than shacking up with some rich widow who'll toss you aside when he gets bored. You don't know anything about Roman, Jade replied, her back hitting the wall. She was trapped in the small apartment with nowhere to run. I know his type, Teresa scoffed. Men like that don't marry girls like us, Jade. We're just temporary. Amusements. The words echoed Olivia's cruel insinuations too closely, striking at Jade's deepest insecurities. Before she could respond, another knock came at the door. That'll be him now, Teresa said, satisfaction evident in her voice. Be nice, Jade. This is a business transaction. Mama, please, Jade begged, genuine fear gripping her now. Don't undo this. But Teresa was already opening the door. Right on time, she said to the newcomer. Come in, she's all ready. Heavy footsteps entered the apartment, a man large by the sound of his tread. The scent of expensive cologne couldn't quite mask the stale smell of cigars that clung to him. This is her, the blind singer. His voice was deep, with an accent Jade couldn't place. Turn around, girl. Let me see what I'm buying. Jade gripped her cane tightly, panic rising in her throat. I'm not for sale, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. And if you touch me, I'll scream this building down. The man chuckled, the sound making Jade's skin crawl. Spirited, I like that. Makes things more interesting. Just give my mother whatever money you promised her and leave, Jade said firmly. Or I start screaming now. Your mother and I have an arrangement, the man replied, moving closer. One I intend to honor. The question is, will you make this easy or difficult? She'll cooperate, Teresa cut in quickly. Just need some time to adjust to the idea. Show her the contract you mentioned, the singing contract. After we conclude our initial business, the man replied, his attention clearly focused on Jade. Now, Miss Walker, we can do this the easy way, or... The apartment door suddenly burst open with such force it slammed against the wall. Get away. If from her, Roman's voice cut through the room like a blade, cold, deadly, promising violence. Roman, Jade gasped, relief and confusion warring within her. Who the hell are you? The stranger demanded, turning toward the interruption. The man who's going to break every bone in your body if you take one more step toward her, Roman replied, his voice terrifyingly calm. Teresa stepped forward. Now wait just a minute. We have a business arrangement. Your business arrangements no longer involve your daughter, Roman cut her off. The debt is paid in full. I have signed receipts from your creditors. Whatever game you're playing ends now. Is that true, Mama? Jade asked, her voice small with renewed betrayal. Did Roman already pay your debt? Teresa's silence was answer. Enough, Mr. Kovalev, Roman addressed the stranger directly. I suggest you leave immediately, unless you'd prefer I call the police and report an attempted human trafficking case. I imagine that would complicate your visa situation considerably. The man, Kovalev, seemed to assess the situation quickly. The woman approached me with a business proposition. I was unaware of any improprieties. Of course you were. Roman's voice dripped with sarcasm. Leave, now. Jade heard hurried footsteps, then the door closing as Kovalev made his exit. The tension in the room remained palpable as Roman turned his attention to Teresa. You've done enough damage, he said, his voice tight with controlled fury. I've transferred enough money to your account for a bus ticket to anywhere in the country. I suggest you use it. If you ever attempt to contact Jade again, I'll make sure you face charges for what you tried to do here today. You can't keep me from my own daughter, Teresa protested. Watch me, Roman replied coldly. Jade is an adult who can make her own decisions, but I will do everything in my power to protect her from people who would harm her, even if that person is her mother. Jade stood frozen, overwhelmed by the rapid turn of events. Part of her wanted to run to Roman, to feel the safety of his arms around her. Another part held back, still wounded by Olivia's revelations, still uncertain of where truth ended and deception began. Jade, baby, Teresa tried one last appeal. Are you going to let him talk to your mother this way, after everything I've done for you? A bitter laugh escaped Jade's lips. Everything you've done for me? You mean like trying to sell me twice? Teresa made a sound of frustration. You don't understand what it's like. Get out, Mama, Jade interrupted, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. Just go. For a moment, she thought Teresa might argue further, but then came the sound of the door opening and closing, followed by receding footsteps. The apartment fell silent. Are you hurt? Roman asked, his voice suddenly gentle, though he didn't move toward her. Jade shook her head, still pressed against the wall. How did you find me? Mrs. Wilson called me, Roman explained. She recognized your mother hanging around the building and got worried. She found my number in your phone. Mrs. Wilson, Jade repeated, a flash of concern breaking through her emotional turmoil. Is she? She's safe. My driver is bringing her back from the store. Roman took a tentative step forward. Jade, I know you don't want to see me right now, but I couldn't let you face this alone. The genuine concern in his voice made Jade's defenses waver. Then she remembered Olivia, the engagement, the pattern of Roman rescuing broken women. Is this what you do? She asked quietly. Swoop in to save the day, be the hero? Roman's sharp intake of breath told her the accusation had hit its mark. Is that what you think? That this is some kind of savior complex? I don't know what to think anymore, Jade admitted, her voice breaking. Olivia lied, Roman interrupted, moving closer but still keeping his distance. Yes, we were briefly involved. Yes, she pushed for an engagement that I nearly agreed to out of sheer loneliness and guilt, but I ended it because I realized I was using her to escape my grief, not because I loved her. His honesty hung in the air between them. Jade's fingers tightened around her cane, seeking stability. When did you meet my mother? When did this arrangement really start? Roman sighed deeply. I heard you sing at the community center 3 months ago. I was there for a fundraiser shortly after ending things with Olivia. about 6 months ago. Now, your voice. It reached something in me I thought had died with Elise. I asked about you afterward, but you had already left. 2 weeks later, your mother approached me, having heard I had been asking questions. She offered to introduce us in exchange for money. And you refused, Jade filled in, remembering what he had told her before. I refused, Roman confirmed, but I couldn't forget your voice. When she called again, desperate about the loan sharks, I saw an opportunity to help you escape a dangerous situation I never intended. He trailed off, then continued with renewed determination. I never expected to fall in love with you, Jade. That wasn't part of any plan or pattern. It simply happened, and it terrifies me as much as it thrills me. The word hung between them, love. He had never said it before, not directly. Love? Jade repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Roman said simply. I love you. Not because you're broken and need fixing, not because you awaken some heroic impulse in me. I love you because you're strong and brilliant and talented, because your courage humbles me, because when I'm with you, I'm more myself than I've been since losing Elise. Jade felt tears spilling down her cheeks. I was so confused, so hurt when Olivia said, I know, Roman interrupted gently. I should have told you everything from the beginning. I was afraid you'd see the arrangement with your mother as manipulation, afraid you'd think less of me for my brief relationship with Olivia, afraid you'd believe I was just substituting one woman for another in some pathetic attempt to assuage my guilt. His honesty was raw, vulnerable in a way that stripped away Jade's remaining defenses. She took a step toward him, then another, her cane guiding her. When she was close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body, she stopped. I was afraid, too, she admitted quietly. Afraid that what we had wasn't real, that I was just another broken thing for you to fix. Roman's hand came up slowly to cup her cheek, his touch achingly familiar. You are not broken, Jade Walker. You are the most whole person I have ever known. Jade leaned into his touch, her eyes closing as relief and love washed through her. Then her hand found the center of his chest, and she felt something wet and warm. Roman, she questioned, alarm rising in her voice. Are you bleeding? His slight hiss of pain confirmed her suspicion. It's nothing. Kovalev had a knife when I first confronted him downstairs. Just a scratch. A scratch doesn't bleed. This much, Jade said, her fingers now slick with his blood. Fear shot through her, sharp and immediate. We need to get you to a hospital. I'm fine, Roman insisted, though his voice had weakened slightly. It looks worse than it is. But Jade could feel him swaying beneath her touch. Roman, please, she begged, her earlier anger and confusion forgotten in the face of his injury. I can't lose you. Not now, not ever. The simple declaration seemed to affect Roman more than his wound. His arm wrapped around her, pulling her against him. I thought I'd lost you already, he murmured against her hair. When you left that night, I needed time, Jade explained, pressing closer despite the blood now staining her blouse. But I never stopped loving you. Not for a moment. The door opened again, and Mrs. Wilson's concerned voice filled the apartment. Oh, my heavens! You're bleeding, young man. I'm calling an ambulance right this minute. What followed was a blur of activity. Paramedics arriving, Roman being loaded onto a stretcher despite his protest that he could walk, Jade insisting on riding in the ambulance with him, her hand gripping his the entire journey. At the hospital, doctors reassured her that the wound, while serious enough to require stitches, had not hit any vital organs. Roman would recover completely with proper rest. When they finally allowed her into his room, Jade moved directly to his bedside, her hands finding his face with unerring accuracy. Don't ever scare me like that again, she said fiercely, leaning down to press her forehead against his. I thought I might lose you. Roman's hand came up to cradle the back of her neck. Never, he promised. "It would take much more than a knife to keep me from you, Jade Walker." The kiss they shared was gentle, mindful of his injury, but filled with all the love and passion that had defined their relationship from the beginning. Against his lips, Jade whispered the words she had held back for fear of vulnerability. "I love you, Roman, with everything I am." His answering smile could be felt even without sight. "Come home," he murmured. "Come home with me, where you belong." And in that moment, Jade knew with absolute certainty that home wasn't a mansion on a hill or an apartment in the city. Home was wherever Roman was, wherever they could be together, healing each other's wounds, building a future neither had dared imagine before their paths unexpectedly crossed. Chapter 9. Passionate Reconciliation. The ride back to Roman's estate was quiet, filled with a comfortable silence that spoke volumes. Jade sat close to him in the back of the car, her hand resting lightly over his bandaged wound, as if she could protect it through sheer force of will. Roman's arm encircled her shoulders, holding her against him, as though afraid she might disappear if he loosened his grip. 3 days in the hospital had given them time to talk. Truly talk, without distractions or interruptions. At first, Jade had kept her distance emotionally, the wounds from Olivia's revelations still raw. "I need to understand everything," she had told him that first night, sitting beside his hospital bed. "No more secrets, no omissions. I need to know who you are, Roman, not the hero who rescued me, not the grieving widower, but the whole complicated man." Roman had nodded, his eyes never leaving hers as he began to speak. He described his grief over Elise in excruciating detail. The nightmares, the guilt, the months he could barely function. He admitted how Olivia had pursued him relentlessly during his most vulnerable time, offering companionship that slowly evolved into a physical relationship he had never fully invested in emotionally. "I tried to love her," he confessed, his voice rough with honesty. "I thought maybe if I went through the motions long enough, feeling would follow. When she pressed for an engagement, I almost agreed, thinking it might force me to move on." "What stopped you?" Jade had asked, her heart in her throat. "I looked at her one morning and realized I was using her to escape my pain, not because I loved her. It wasn't fair to either of us." His hand had reached for Jade's tentatively. "What I feel for you, it's nothing like that. With you, I'm not escaping anything. I'm finally facing life again." Each confession, each painful truth had gradually rebuilt the trust between them. Jade had shared her own demons, her terror of abandonment, her struggle with self-worth after losing her sight, her fear that love would always come with conditions she couldn't meet. "My mother taught me that love is transactional," she had explained on the second day, "that you're only valued for what you can provide. It's why I fought so hard against what I was feeling for you. I was afraid it wasn't real, that I was just grateful or worse, that you only wanted me because I needed saving." "And now?" Roman had asked, vulnerability naked in his voice. Jade's fingers had traced his face gently. "Now I understand that real love isn't about need at all. It's about choice. And I choose you, Roman, not because you saved me, but because you see me as I am and love me anyway." Now, as the car turned onto the long driveway leading to the mansion, Jade felt the tension she'd been carrying for days finally begin to release. She was coming home, not to the gilded cage she had first perceived, but to the place where her heart had unexpectedly found its match. "Mrs. Bennet has been preparing for your return all day," Roman said softly, his lips brushing her temple. "I think she missed you almost as much as I did." Jade smiled, leaning into his touch. "I missed her too. I missed everything about this place." "Everything?" Roman asked, a note of vulnerability in his voice that still surprised her. She turned, her face up to his. Everything, but mostly you. When the car finally stopped at the front entrance, Mrs. Bennet was waiting, her normally reserved demeanor breaking into genuine warmth as she greeted Jade with a quick, motherly embrace. "Welcome home, dear," she said. "Everything's just as you left it." Not quite everything, Jade thought. She was different now, stronger, more certain of what she wanted, of who she was. Roman was different too. His walls finally lowered completely, his heart fully open to her in a way it hadn't been before. Roman insisted on walking through the house himself, despite the doctor's orders to rest, his hand firmly holding Jade's. As they moved from room to room, in each space, memories flooded back. Their first dinner together, their first conversation in the library, the moment in the music room when they created something beautiful together. When they reached the bedroom they had shared, Roman paused, suddenly unsure. "I've had Mrs. Bennet prepare your old suite as well," he said quietly, "if you'd prefer your own space for now." Jade turned to face him, her hands finding his chest, careful to avoid his injury. "I want to be where you are," she said simply. The tension in his body released at her words. "I was afraid you might need more time." "We've wasted enough time already," Jade replied, sliding her hands up to cup his face. "I nearly lost you, Roman. I don't want to spend another night away from you." His arms encircled her, drawing her against him with gentle pressure. "I love you, Jade Walker," he whispered against her hair, "more than I ever thought possible." "Show me," she answered, her voice low with desire too long denied. Roman's hand tilted her face up to his. "Are you sure? The doctor said I should avoid strenuous activity." A smile curved Jade's lips. "Then I'll have to do all the work, won't I?" Her boldness drew a groan from deep in Roman's chest. His lips found hers in a kiss that started gentle but quickly blazed into something more desperate, more consuming. Days of separation, of fear and uncertainty, transformed into passion that could no longer be contained. They made their way to the bed with slow, deliberate movements, mindful of Roman's injury, yet unwilling to deny themselves the reconnection they both craved. Jade took the lead, carefully unbuttoning his shirt, her fingers tracing the edges of the bandage with reverent care before moving on to explore the familiar planes of his chest. "I thought I'd lost you," she whispered, pressing her lips to his neck, his shoulder, the place above his heart. "When I felt your blood on my hands..." Roman caught her face between his palms. "I'm right here," he assured her, "and I'm not going anywhere." Their clothes fell away under gentle, searching hands. When they were finally skin to skin, Jade settled carefully above him, mindful of his wound, even as desire threatened to overwhelm her caution. Roman's hands guided her hips, supporting her as she took him inside her body with a soft gasp of completion. "My love," he breathed, watching her with wonder as she began to move above him. "My beautiful, strong, incredible love." Their reunion transcended the physical, becoming something almost spiritual in its intensity. Each point of contact between them burned away the doubt and fear of the past days. Jade moved above him with languid grace, no longer the hesitant lover of their first night together, but a woman who knew her own desires and his. Roman surrendered control completely, trusting her to protect his injury while bringing them both to the edge of ecstasy. "Look at me," she whispered, though she couldn't see his eyes. "Feel me watching you." The intimacy of that impossible request undid him. When they finally shattered together, it wasn't just physical release but emotional catharsis, the final healing of wounds that had nearly torn them apart. Jade settled carefully beside him afterward, her breath coming in soft gasps against his neck, her fingertips tracing idle patterns across his chest, as if rewriting their story with invisible ink on his skin. "That was worth waiting for," Roman murmured, his fingers trailing lazily along her spine. Jade smiled against his skin. "I hope the doctor wouldn't consider that strenuous activity." "If he did, It was worth it, Roman replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I'd risk a few stitches for a homecoming like that. They lay in contented silence, listening to each other breathe, feeling the steady rhythm of their hearts beating in tandem. Outside, twilight was falling, bathing the room in soft golden light that Jade could sense if not see. I want to talk about the future, Roman said finally, his voice quiet but determined. About us. Jade pushed herself up on one elbow, her face turned toward his. What about us? Roman's hand found hers, threading their fingers together. I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few weeks, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. He paused, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I want you to stay, Jade. Not for a month, not as some temporary arrangement, forever. Jade's heart seemed to stop, then race ahead. What are you saying, Roman? He sat up carefully, wincing slightly at the pull of his stitches, and reached toward the nightstand. I had this with me at the hospital, he said, pressing something small and round into her palm. I was waiting for the right moment. Jade's fingers closed around the object, a ring, she realized, with a shock that sent heat rushing through her entire body. The band was delicate, with an intricate pattern she could feel beneath her sensitive fingertips. At its center was a stone, not large and ostentatious, but perfectly sized, with a cut she could trace with her nail. Roman, she breathed, overwhelmed by the implications. It was my grandmother's, he explained, his voice soft with emotion. A woman who believed in love so completely that she followed her heart across an ocean to be with the man she couldn't live without. His hands closed around hers, warm and steady. I want to build a life with you, Jade. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep with you in my arms every night. I want to make music with you, create with you, grow old with you. Tears welled in Jade's eyes, spilling unchecked down her cheeks. We've been through so much in such a short time, she whispered. We have, Roman agreed, and we've come out stronger for it. I know who you are now, Jade, not the woman I thought I was rescuing, but the woman who rescued me from a half-life I'd resigned myself to living. His voice dropped lower, heavy with sincerity. I love you. Will you marry me? Jade didn't hesitate. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. Roman slipped the ring onto her finger, where it fit as if made for her hand. Then his mouth found hers in a kiss that tasted of salt tears and sweet joy, and promises too profound for words. Their passions reignited, slower this time, but no less intense. They made love with tender deliberation, each touch an exploration. Each kiss, a celebration of the future stretching before them, a future neither had dared imagine when fate first brought them together through the most unlikely of circumstances. Later, curled against Roman's side with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Jade marveled at the strange, winding path that had led her here. Her mother's betrayal, which had seemed like the end of everything, had become the beginning of something more beautiful than she could have dreamed. What are you thinking? Roman asked, his fingers playing with her curls. Jade smiled against his skin. That sometimes the darkest moments lead to the brightest light. Roman's arms tightened around her. You are my light, Jade Walker. Soon, too, be Jade Carter, if you like the sound of that. I do, she whispered, the two simple words both an answer and a promise. One she intended to keep for all the days and nights to come. Chapter 10. Eternal Bond. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of the master bedroom, warming Jade's face as she sat at the vanity, her fingers carefully applying her makeup. Today was unlike any other in her life, a day she had never dared to imagine during those dark years after losing her sight. 6 months had passed since Roman's proposal. 6 months of planning, of healing, of building a life together that exceeded even her most hopeful dreams. Roman's wound had healed quickly, leaving only a small scar that Jade traced with loving fingers when they lay together at night. Their relationship had deepened with each passing day, growing stronger through the honest communication they had fought so hard to establish. "Need any help in there?" Mrs. Bennet called from the doorway. "I think I've got it," Jade replied with a smile. "Though you might check my lipstick. I can't see if it's even." The housekeeper approached, her familiar footsteps comforting after all these months. "Perfect," she pronounced. "You could do this professionally, you know." Jade laughed. "Years of practice. When you can't see, your other senses compensate. Your dress is ready whenever you are," Mrs. Bennet said, a hint of emotion in her normally practical voice. "It's as beautiful as you are, dear." After the housekeeper left, Jade sat for a moment, gathering her thoughts. So much had changed. Since that first night Roman had brought her to this house, she had arrived a captive, bristling with resentment and fear. Now she was about to become the mistress of this estate, bound to Roman by choice and love rather than circumstance. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her reverie. "Jade?" A familiar voice called Dr. Reynolds, the specialist Roman had consulted about her eyes. "Come in, doctor," Jade called, turning toward the door. The doctor's footsteps entered, followed by the subtle scent of clinical antiseptic that always accompanied him. "I have the results from your latest tests," he said, his voice carefully neutral in that way doctors have when delivering significant news. Jade's heart quickened. After her engagement to Roman, he had insisted on getting second and third opinions about her blindness. The last specialist had suggested an experimental procedure, one with no guarantees but a small chance of restoring partial sight. "And?" Jade asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "You're an excellent candidate," Dr. Reynolds said, the smile now evident in his voice. "The nerve damage isn't as extensive as previously thought. With the new microsurgery techniques we've developed, there's a 60% chance of restoring some functional vision. Not perfect sight, but shapes, movement, perhaps even colors eventually." Jade's hands trembled in her lap. "When could we do the procedure?" "I've scheduled an opening for next month, if you're interested," Dr. Reynolds replied. "But today is your wedding day. We can discuss details later." After the doctor left, Jade sat, frozen, emotions swirling through her. The possibility of seeing again, even imperfectly, was overwhelming. She would be able to see Roman's face, the home they shared, the world they moved through together. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. What if the surgery changed things between them? What if seeing Roman physically didn't match the image she had created in her mind? What if, once she could see, she was no longer the woman he had fallen in love with? The door opened again, this time without a knock. "You're not supposed to see the bride before the wedding," Jade said, recognizing Roman's footsteps immediately. "Good. Thing you can't see me then," he teased, approaching to stand behind her chair. His hands came to rest on her shoulders, warm and reassuring. "Besides, some traditions are made to be broken." Jade reached up to cover his hand with hers. "Dr. Reynolds was just here, I know," Roman said quietly. "He told me about the surgery." "What if it changes everything?" Jade whispered, giving voice to her fears. "What if, when I can see you, when you can see me," Roman interrupted gently, "you'll discover I'm not nearly as handsome as you've imagined. My nose is a bit crooked from a college boxing match, and I have a scar through my right eyebrow from a childhood accident." "I don't care about that," Jade protested. "Exactly," Roman said, turning her chair to face him, dropping to one knee before her. "And I don't care if you can see or not. I fell in love with you, Jade Walker, your spirit, your courage, your heart. Whether you ever see my face or not, you've seen me more clearly than anyone ever has." Tears welled in Jade's eyes. "I love you so much," she whispered. "Then marry me today," Roman said, his hands cupping her face. "Marry me, and whatever comes next, whether the surgery works or not, we'll face it together." An hour later, Jade stood at the entrance to the garden, her arm linked through Mrs. Wilson's. The elderly woman had happily agreed to give her away, her affection for both Jade and Roman evident in her tearful acceptance of their invitation. "You look like an angel, honey," Mrs. Wilson whispered, patting Jade's hand where it rested on her arm. "That man of yours won't know what hit him." Jade smiled, feeling beautiful in the gown she and Mrs. Bennet had selected. Ivory silk that flowed like water around her body, delicate lace overlaying the bodice, tiny pearls hand-sewn along the neckline. Her hair had been arranged in an elegant updo, with a few curls left loose to frame her face. Around her neck hung Roman's grandmother's pendant, matching the ring that sparkled on her finger. The string quartet began playing, the music swelling in the perfect May afternoon. With careful steps, Jade moved forward along the petal-strewn path, guided by Mrs. Wilson and her own practiced memory of the garden layout. Though she couldn't see the 50 guests who had risen to their feet, she could feel their presence, hear their murmurs of admiration as she passed. Then she was at the altar, and Roman's hand was taking hers, warm and steady, and so familiar now it felt like an extension of herself. "You're breathtaking," he whispered for her ears alone. The ceremony passed in a blur of emotion. They had written their own vows, promises that acknowledged the unusual beginning of their relationship while celebrating the love that had grown from such unlikely soil. When Roman spoke of finding light in his darkest hour, his voice broke with emotion. When Jade spoke of seeing with her heart what her eyes could not, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. "I pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant finally declared. "You may kiss your bride." Roman's hands cradled Jade's face with exquisite tenderness as his lips found hers in a kiss that sealed their union. The guests applauded, but for Jade, the world had narrowed to just this moment, just this man who had become her partner, her lover, her home. The reception that followed was intimate but joyous. Roman had spared no expense, transforming the back terrace into an enchanted space with hanging lights, fragrant flowers, and a dance floor beneath the stars. He described every detail to Jade as they moved through the evening, his words painting pictures her eyes couldn't see, but her heart could perfectly imagine. During their first dance, as Roman held her close while a jazz quartet played "The Way," "You look tonight," he whispered against her hair. "Are you happy, Mrs. Carter?" Jade smiled, her face tilted up toward his. "Happier than I ever thought possible." Later, as the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Roman led Jade to a quiet corner of the garden. "I have something for you," he said, placing a small box in her hands. Jade opened it carefully, her fingers finding a delicate object inside, a paperweight, she realized, made of solid crystal. As she explored its shape, she found it was carved in the form of a rose in full bloom. "It's beautiful," she said, tracing the intricate petals with her fingertip. "My mother gave it to my father on their wedding day," Roman explained. She told him that love, like crystal, is both incredibly strong and surprisingly delicate. It can last forever if treated with care, but shatter if taken for granted. Jade held the crystal rose carefully, touched by both the gift and its meaning. "I'll treasure it always. I have one more surprise," Roman said, a smile evident in his voice. "Our honeymoon." "Where are we going?" Jade asked, curious. "New Orleans," Roman replied, his hand covering hers. "To your grandmother's hometown. I've arranged for us to meet some of her distant relatives who still live there. I thought you might like to reconnect with that part of your heritage." Tears sprang to Jade's eyes at the thoughtfulness of his gift. "Roman," she whispered, overwhelmed with love. "That's perfect." He gathered her in his arms, holding her close as the sounds of the party faded around them. Just the beginning of our adventure, my love. As the stars wheeled overhead, unseen but felt in the cool night air, Jade and Roman stood entwined in the garden where they had first begun to fall in love. Whether the surgery in her future would restore some portion of her sight remained uncertain. But Jade had never seen more clearly than she did in this moment the beauty of love that transcends darkness, the miracle of finding wholeness in another soul, the promise of a future built on understanding and acceptance so complete it bordered on the divine. "Take me to bed, husband," Jade whispered against Roman's lips. "I want to feel you, all of you, until neither of us can tell where one ends and the other begins." Roman's answer was a kiss that spoke of passion undiminished by familiarity, of desire deepened by true intimacy, of love that had survived its trial by fire and emerged unbreakable. He lifted her into his arms, carrying her through the garden and into the house that had once been her gilded cage and was now their shared sanctuary. In their bedroom, they came together with the perfect synchronicity of lovers who had learned each other's bodies as thoroughly as musicians learn their instruments. Every touch was a note in their private symphony, every kiss a verse in the poem they composed together. They moved in perfect harmony, building toward a crescendo that left them breathless and trembling in each other's arms. Afterward, as they lay entwined in the peaceful quiet of their wedding night, Roman traced lazy patterns on Jade's bare back, his voice soft in the darkness. "What are you thinking?" Jade smiled against his chest, her finger tracing the outline of his healing scar. "That some journeys begin in the strangest ways, but end exactly where we're meant to be." Roman's arms tightened around her. "This isn't an ending, my love. It's just the beginning." And as sleep claimed them both, Jade knew with absolute certainty that he was right. Whatever the future held, restored vision or continued darkness, challenges or triumphs, joy or sorrow, they would face it together, bound by a love that had begun in the most unlikely circumstances, but had grown into something rare and precious and eternal. In Roman's arms, Jade had found more than a husband. She had found the other half of her soul, the home she had always sought, the light that would guide her through whatever darkness might come. And in that knowledge was a peace so profound it transcended all the pain and betrayal that had led her to this moment of perfect contentment. Some might call it fate, others coincidence, but Jade and Roman knew it for what it truly was. A love so deep and true it could transform the darkest night into the brightest day. A love worth fighting for, worth living for, worth believing in against all odds, a love for all time.